Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today is Thursday, the 2nd of April, 2026. Let's get right to it. Microsoft has announced that they are going to invest $1 billion in Thailand. We'll cover that. And later in the program, we will be joined by Michael Cronin, the Managing Director, APAC at Couchbase, to explore how enterprises are adopting operational data platforms to drive efficiency and support artificial intelligence initiatives, followed by David Irecki, the Chief Technology Officer for APJ at Boomi, to discuss how enterprises are handling AI agent orchestration and API management as AI infrastructure becomes more complex and non-trivial. Finally, Dr. Clemen Chiang, CEO at Spiking, will join us to dig into just how market intelligence platforms are using AI to process massive data streams and translate that into actionable insights for investors. Okay, Microsoft's plan to invest more than $1 billion in Thailand over just the next 2 years is one of the most important Southeast Asia tech stories right now. And it's not just because of the amount, but because of what it means and what it signifies. This is not only about building more cloud infrastructure or even just AI infrastructure. Microsoft is also positioning the investment around technology, trust, and maybe most importantly, talent. People will be employed, right? So again, this kind of goes against the common theory here that anytime a data center opens or anytime that artificial intelligence is involved, people are going to lose their jobs. Microsoft is committed here to saying that they're going to do some stuff on the talent side, which means real people are going to get real jobs. In other words, it's investing in infrastructure, regulatory confidence, and skills at the same time. And we have to ask ourselves, why does this matter? Like, why do we think this is really important? And I want to preface this by saying, I live in Bangkok. I've lived in Bangkok for 15 years. I have a very unique perspective on this. And I think that this means that Thailand is no longer being treated merely as a consumer market or just a downstream destination for software adoption. It's being positioned as part of the region's production layer for cloud and artificial intelligence. Microsoft said the investment will support a Thailand cloud region, ongoing operations, an AI data center infrastructure built to its global standards, including sustainability measures such as green energy and water positivity. It also said the development and operation of the cloud region will create skilled employment, as I mentioned, and transfer technical and operational expertise to Thai partners. In other words, this is not only a sales expansion. They're not just trying to do more business in Thailand. It's an attempt to embed Thailand deeper into the physical and institutional stack, frankly, of the global AI economy. This is really important because infrastructure changes the role of a country. Once a country has local cloud capacity, lower latency services, local compliance pathways, and a thicker ecosystem of implementation partners, startups, enterprises, and government agencies can build more of their digital activity domestically. And this is all super important. The real significance is not just that Thai companies may use more Microsoft products. That alone would be good for Microsoft. But it's that Thailand becomes a place where regional workloads can be hosted, managed, governed, and expanded. And I genuinely hope this will help Thailand become a real AI infrastructure hub. Again, like I said, I live here. But will this work? Do we think this is going to work? Look, the evidence here increasingly says yes, but with an important caveat. Microsoft is not arriving in a vacuum. It's not like there's no competition here. It's not like nobody else is investing in Thailand. It was reported back in 2024 that Google was also going to invest $1 billion in Thailand to build a data center and a cloud region in Bangkok and Chonburi, explicitly to support growing cloud demand and AI adoption in Southeast Asia. Just to be clear, if you're not familiar with the geography of Thailand, okay, there's the Gulf of Thailand here. Bangkok sits here. Chonburi is like right over here, but this is right at the top of the Eastern Economic Corridor. And that is the place where massive amounts of manufacturing occurs in Thailand. And you may or may not know this, but Thailand is the second largest manufacturer of Japanese cars outside of Japan. Every label makes cars in Thailand, every Japanese label. Toyota manufacturers here, Honda manufacturers here, Isuzu manufacturers here, Mitsubishi manufacturers here. All of them. You probably didn't know that. You probably also don't know that Thailand is the largest maker of sophisticated optical lenses in the world. So it's not like there's not a lot of other manufacturing going on here, not a lot of other sophisticated stuff going on here. There is. And that's why I think this is so cool. And that's why I'm confident Now let's get back to Google. Google said that project would help power services ranging from Google Cloud to Google Workspace. And it tied the investment to Thailand's cloud-first policy. When the government here decides they want to do something, they do something and they accomplish something. Amazon as well announced a major Thailand infrastructure push earlier, and it was reported in 2022. So we're going even further back that this type of stuff is happening. And this is why I said, like, Microsoft is not operating in a vacuum here. In 2022, Amazon said that AWS planned to build data centers and an infrastructure hub in Bangkok as well. And more recently, Data Center Dynamics reported that both Google and AWS now have operating regions in the country, with Google's Thai cloud region launched earlier this year and AWS's Thailand region, which launched in January 2026. Everybody wants to be here. I mean, fundamentally and clearly, this story is way bigger than just Microsoft. Thailand now looks like a contested infrastructure market among the top cloud platforms, and that's good. Competition's always good. And this is a different category of story from big tech sees growth in Southeast Asia. We've been hearing about this, frankly, the entire time I've been living in Thailand. But it does suggest that Thailand is being pulled into a regional race over where AI workloads will live and where enterprises will anchor their next generation of digital operations. Also super important. There's also a policy and investment backdrop that supports this interpretation. It has been reported in January that Thailand's investment applications rose 35% in 2024 to a 10-year high, led by foreign investment in data centers and cloud services. That was for like 1.14 trillion baht. And then in March of 2025, so a little bit more than a year ago, there were reports that Thailand improved 90 billion baht. And just to put it in perspective, that's $2.7 billion in additional investment in data centers and cloud services. What's happening here is real. And frankly, as a resident of Thailand, I love it. And it tells you this is not a one-off corporate bet. It is part of a broader national investment cycle. But what do we think this says about like hyperscale confidence in Southeast Asia? I think it's pretty obvious. But it's also maybe the most interesting part of this story. I mean, globally, and we've covered this a lot actually, globally there are growing questions about whether AI infrastructure spending is becoming too large, too energy intensive, or too hard to justify at current valuations. Yeah, and there's a story about OpenAI. We'll cover that at some point too. Reuters reported this week that major tech companies had planned about $635 billion in AI-related spending for 2026, and that's up from $383 billion last year. But that rising energy prices and broader instability could force revisions in those numbers. A separate piece argued that the challenge remains the physical bottlenecks. Again, we've covered this a lot. Power, grid access, skilled labor, transformers, and simply just building all this stuff out just takes time, right? And despite all of these issues, Microsoft is still going to expand in Thailand, and that is what makes this announcement notable. I think it suggests Southeast Asia remains one of the places where hyperscalers believe new capacity is still strategically justified. And you have to ask why. Well, because the region combines rising enterprise digitalization, a large addressable population, almost 700 million people, super intensifying AI adoption across the board, both by individuals and by big institutions and governments. And the government here that increasingly want domestic or regionally domiciled cloud capability. We talked about this. Everybody wants to have cloud in their own country because they want to make sure that they have some kind of data sovereignty and that they have control over where their data is. Right? There's also a geopolitical and diversification logic here. Thailand has increasingly been pitched as a relatively stable, neutral investment destination. Look, I live here. Like I said, I've lived here for 15 years. I've never felt unsafe, ever. I feel just as safe here any time of day or night as I felt during the 20-something years that I lived in Tokyo, and that's a gigantic statement. I love living here. Nobody that I know that lives here complains about it. It does feel very stable. It does feel very contained. Yeah, and as a place to do business, simple, really, really simple. Reuters noted that Thailand's Board of Investment, we call it the BOI, said investors still saw the country as a safe and suitable for long-term investment, and that foreign pledges were being supported by broader shifts in supply chains and investment geography. For hyperscalers, obviously that matters, right? It matters completely. You don't just put infrastructure and AI infrastructure in particular, where demand exists. You place it where policy, regulation, land, partners, and most importantly, long-term operating conditions are likely to stay workable. I live in Thailand. That sounds just about right to me. It really does. That sounds exactly how I would describe it. But look, nothing ever develops in a straight line. And you just have to ask yourselves, like, what are the challenges? What are some of the things that could stop this from delivering the full upside that people are talking about now? And the short answer is power, execution, and diffusion. We've spent a lot of time talking about power, both in the US and in Europe, but also in Asia. We mentioned on one of our shows, I believe it was either this week or last week, where we talked about how everybody in the region was thinking about revisiting nuclear power, right? Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines are all thinking about it. And the Associated Press cited Ember data showing more than 2,000 data centers across the region, and noted that Southeast Asia could account for a quarter of global energy demand growth by 2035. And that sounds completely reasonable to me, just considering what I see from construction growth and everything else that's happening just in Thailand alone. But don't forget about the rest of the countries in the region either. Thailand itself, because that's what we're talking about today, has set a target of adding 600 megawatts of nuclear generating capacity by 2037. It's just not that far away. We always talk about these years in the future, and it feels like, whoa, that's never going to happen. I could be dead by then, but 2037, just not that far away. So the infrastructure race is now colliding with an energy security story. We talked about this already, and that is a very serious shift. We mentioned that one of the challenges here is the execution. Look, I don't know what it looks like to people outside of Thailand, but historically, Thailand has been able to execute very large-scale manufacturing projects and new technology implementations at scale. I've seen it. I've been involved in some of it. I do not have any concerns about Thailand being able to execute this plan. You just have no idea how hardworking and persistent Thai people are. Give them something to do, man. It's going to get taken care of. I'll put it to you this way. When plans are announced to just construct a new building, even before the building starts going up, but just when the workers start coming in, you'll see food stalls, you'll see, clothing, everything just sets up around there. These are some of the most entrepreneurial people I've ever seen in my whole life, and they work super hard. Anyway, diffusion was the third thing that we talked about as a potential risk here. And Microsoft itself practically acknowledges this out loud. In its statement, the company said there's a noticeable gap in AI diffusion between the developed world and the developing world. And it tied the Thailand investment not to just infrastructure, but to trust and to talent as well. There's that word again, talent. That means jobs. Microsoft has said that it has already helped more than 2 million people in Thailand acquire AI skills over the past 2 years. That the National Digital Learning Platform reaches more than 600,000 high school students in Thailand, and that a partnership with the Department of Skill Development aims to upskill and certify 150,000 more workers. And that tells you that Microsoft understands the real bottleneck is not simply compute. We're way past that, actually. It's whether businesses, schools, workers, and institutions can actually use the technology productively and safely. And this is great news for Microsoft, Thailand, and the rest of Southeast Asia. At the end of the day, right, this is not just a vote of confidence for one country or in one country. To me, and I love the fact that it's going to have big impact in Thailand. There's nothing makes me happier than seeing $1 billion invested by a real company into Thailand that's going to upskill workers, that's going to work together with the government, that's going to do all these things, right, and build real artificial intelligence infrastructure in Thailand. This is a win-win all the way around. But it's also a sign that Southeast Asia is moving into a more consequential phase of the AI cycle, one that is more concrete, more tangible, and frankly, more visible. I'm guessing if you drive down through Chonburi, again, it's not that far from here, about 45 minutes south from here. If I have my time right, I haven't driven here in a while, but you'll probably see some Google buildings there. There's a Google data center, right? But this story overall is about cloud regions, power availability. And I think every story when it comes to artificial intelligence at some level is about power availability, regulatory frameworks, skills pipelines, and who gets to host the region's next wave of enterprise and public sector workloads. Okay, we're finished with that story for now. We'll be right back with a list of pretty incredible guests. Okay, here we go. Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Look, we wanted to bring you on because we wanted to talk to you about how enterprises are adopting operational data platforms to drive efficiency and support AI initiatives. I mean, that's like the elephant in the room today. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about Couchbase.
Sure. And Michael, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you today. You know, Couchbase is the operational data platform for AI. It is not a database. It is a platform that allows enterprises to consolidate their data layer to drive down cost, increase speed to innovation, and guarantee performance at high availability and scale. I think when we look at AI initiatives and where they're successful and where they're not, it tends to the data layer and the fragmentation at the data layer seems to be the key area where enterprises are struggling to solve the problem. So it's kind of exactly where we fit in at Couchbase.
So, can I just follow up on that a little bit? How have we ended up in a situation with some of these large enterprises, particularly when we've been having discussions about big data, which I'll put in quotes, for at least a decade now, I think, unless I'm remembering this incorrectly.
Right.
But have we ended up in a situation where a lot of these big enterprises still have such fragmented data, where like they don't have their data organized in a way that's efficient yet?
Oh, absolutely. I think, over the past decade, enterprise IT has grown fragmented almost intentionally, right? IT technology problems were solved with best of breed technology. So you use this product for this problem and this product for another problem, and 10 years later you wind up with this kind of Frankenstein monster that makes the data layer cumbersome and impossible to interact with any scale or performance or predictability. I think secondarily it might have been done. We see in some cases that it was done intentionally, not to strategically align with a single vendor in order to reduce being single threaded and reduce risk that way. But in both cases, it's wound up being we wind up with these fragmented data layers that are cumbersome and hard to operate. Just as an example, just last month there were two major outages in Singapore, DBS Bank and Singtel. The Singtel outage was 8 hours long. We'd like to think that maybe it was a bug or someone tripped over a plug in a data center, but the reality is it was a result of a fragmented architecture that just wasn't built to operate, in real time at scale.
Yes, look, we had the head of DBS's innovation and stuff on our show last year sometime. Those guys have spent a ton of effort and a ton of money. I don't know if it's to consolidate their data stuff, because I like this idea of how you said about the stuff is fragmented almost on purpose because they wanted to use best in breed stuff. And it's almost like they didn't anticipate the idea that now we can have all this unstructured data all in the same place, because artificial intelligence now allows us to address it easily and in a more seamless way. But before we get to that, what do you believe is driving renewed enterprise investment in operational data platforms? And why has this become like a board level issue rather than just like an IT issue, if that makes sense?
Yep, I think every board and every big enterprise has AI development as one of their strategic pillars, and I think that most of them are starting to figure out that their data layer is the barrier to adoption. I think the focus on the UI part of AI before the data layer has led to a lot of false starts and stalls, and so. Yes, there is increased energy around the data layer, especially when it comes to consolidation, because the data layer in AI, the data layer is moving so much closer to the user. Especially in Asia, where there's a much higher than global digital adoption. The user communities are massive. There's a really strong demand for localized, personalized, highly available content. That fragmented data layer is the barrier to entry. We have one of the big banks in the region is on Couchbase now, had 6 different layers of their data layer. They had kind of one of every database. They were using Mongo and Cassandra and HBase, Oracle, SQL Server. And then in front of that, they were putting Redis as a cache. And behind it, they were putting Elastic for vector and search. And then they were using Confluent for eventing and so on. And what they found is they had increased their cost exponentially because you have 6 different contracts, and then their supportability went down because they had 6 different support models and enablement models. On top of all of that, what they found, the worst piece was that it pushed them right up to the limit of their customer-facing SLAs. So innovation froze.
Yeah.
And fast forward a year later, they've completely consolidated all of that onto Couchbase, and it's allowed them to, reduce their cost, increase their supportability, and increase their time to innovation.
Look, I worked at some really large companies. I don't know if you know this, but I worked at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs in Tokyo for most of my career in Tokyo, and I can't remember a situation where, even though we ran different applications for just some of the different business units, I'm just trying to understand how a big bank, like the big institution like this, ends up with so many different database layers, because now they have like the same guy that's managing Mongo is not going to be managing SQL. And it's like, how do they manage all this stuff? It's got to be insane inside there, no?
The punchline is they don't do it very well, right? Right. They have, it's quite common for us to find one of everything in an account. And that is exactly the problem. Back to your original question about board level attention.
Yeah.
That strategic consolidation motion inside big enterprises at the C-suite and the board level is exactly because of that problem. So right? They are looking to consolidate to build themselves for speed.
So how hard is it to get them to do what you just said that they did, right? Not just moving on to Couchbase, right? That's the easy answer. But how hard is it to get a big institution like this that says, because remember, they have 6 support teams, right? And they have a human resources issue here as well, not just a technical issue, right? How do you get them to move on to just like one big platform in a way that they weren't going to do it before? Like, what do you have to show them? What kind of efficiencies do they have to see?
Sure. And I think, again, because it's a strategic board level push down opportunity.
Yeah.
For us, we build trust. We build trust over time. At that bank example I gave you where there were 10 different databases and 6 different layers.
Yeah.
We picked one. We picked Mongo because Mongo always comes with Redis, right? You can't do Mongo without Redis and without Elastic. And so it was a really quick, easy win. 6 months later, we had our pilot for consolidation. We had consolidated, 3 different technologies in their stack. The executives at the enterprise said, okay, that's a good proof point. Let's keep going. And so then we absorbed Cassandra and so on and so on.
Okay, this is I love the way you've explained this, actually. And this is the perfect way to do it. It's like big institutions don't just do, and I remember when I was in Morgan and Goldman, we never just rolled out, boom, one gigantic monolithic thing to replace like 7 other things that we did. We took one of the pieces and we said, let's see if it works. And then we did that. And if that worked, then we did maybe 1 more, then we did 3 more, then we just did everything. And I think that's important for people to understand, like, why these big institutions find themselves in this position, but also how they actually rectify this. So that was a really great example. Let's talk more specifically about artificial intelligence, if that's okay.
Sure.
How does AI, or how is AI reshaping data platform architecture and the expectations around that data platform architecture?
Right. I think, AI is bringing the data layer closer to the user, right? It has to have context. It has to have live real-time context. It has to have low latency, high availability, right? Enterprise class governance. I think it's really easy to run it in batch in after hours, right? There's lots of tools and lots of enterprises building big data lakes, or what they're being called lake houses now.
Yeah. Lake house.
Right.
We have to laugh at that, can't we?
It is. Well, a data lake needs a house next to it, I guess. Right. So it's really important, right? You can train models overnight and over weeks and over months, and you can operate on really huge data sets in batch. It doesn't solve the AI challenge to bring AI closer to the user. Yeah. And so I think that's the biggest shift is in bringing the data layer closer to the user itself. I'll give you an example. Tesco's a big customer of ours. They run all of their technical operation, innovation, and technical leadership out of Asia. They have a dynamic pricing engine that in real time, depending on what interface you're coming in, what store you're buying from, what you're buying, when you're buying, whether or not, the different context about you will be instantly given a dynamic price. And
Wow.
and then it's not just that, but that application then interacts with 10 other applications that have the product description and the SKU and how it's going to be delivered and how you pay for it. And that's all in a single kind of sub-second transaction for the user. And I think that's the biggest the biggest change going on, is enabling and unlocking that kind of real-time interactivity at scale.
So that addresses like this speed issue, right? If you bring the data layer closer to the end user, that speed layer actually gets disintermediated. But can you talk a little bit, because you mentioned this word governance? How do you look at governance, and how do you work with some of your customers around AI governance, but also like the data platform governance as well?
Well, sure. I think the challenge with that, that's another challenge with the fragmentation, right?
Yeah.
Because you have a dozen different products and vendors interacting in your data layer, and how that's consolidated from a governance perspective is really difficult. Again, going back to the whole point that Couchbase isn't a database, it's a data platform,
Yeah.
right? It centralizes that component of it as well. So it centralizes the interactivity to the applications and the end user, but in the back end, it does the same thing at a governance from a governance perspective.
And what role, like, where does agentic AI come to play in this as well?
I'm sorry?
Agentic AI?
So, that from our perspective, we're completely agnostic, right?
Okay.
I think how once you solve the data layer challenge and it's available for access with low latency and high availability at scale,
Yep.
like what the developers do, what the AI use cases want to do is now unlocked. So how they use it and how they build against it's completely up to the enterprise and their developers. So, you know, going back to the original problem, if you have that fragmented data layer, it makes it really hard to build agentic AI applications, because it's not built for real time and it's not built for scale.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest problem, right? We had gigantic problems when we moved from, like you said, static data to dynamic real-time data. Like almost everything had to change. The throughput had to change, the compute had to change, all this stuff. And I can see how that's going to change inside of other institutions, because we were trading, right? So we were getting real-time data constantly. We had to adjust right away. But this is a different dynamic, I think, for different types of institutions.
That bank customer of ours that I mentioned
Yep.
at the beginning, they were pinned against their SLA, so they had a strategic laundry list of all of the innovation they wanted to push out to their customers, but they realized they couldn't do it without impacting the customer experience, right? So they couldn't get any more real-time applications out to the customer until they fixed their data layer.
What does it feel like inside some of these institutions when they actually institute these changes? Like, what does it feel like to them from a customer service perspective? But you've mentioned SLA a couple of times as well. What does it feel like when they make all these massive changes?
It's almost like Christmas come early. Like that Tesco customer that I mentioned,
Yep.
after they had consolidated onto Couchbase, they had built the application to interact with each other in real time. They were somewhere between 1 million and 2 million transactions per second during their peak period during
Wow.
Christmas. Afterwards, we get a call thanking us for a Merry Christmas, right? Because they had zero customer impact. They were able to grow their business, their holiday business, by double digits,
Oh my God.
just based on the increased kind of SLA overhead that allowed them to innovate faster for their customers because of Couchbase.
Wow. That's a real testament to
I think if there are two takeaways, one, we all have to agree that there's a problem, right? The data layer,
yeah.
the fragmented data layer is the barrier to innovation with AI. And then the second thing is the problem's not really that hard to solve with Couchbase, and our customers are benefiting from it.
So when you go to your big institutional customers, right, how do you see them internally? And I'll let you go after this, right? But I always say that, and I have like 5 more questions, but let's see what happens. But how do you see these companies shift organizationally? Do you know what I mean? Like, what happens, not just technically, but what is, in your experience, how do you see them change organizationally in terms of like talent, decision-making, and alignment between the business and technology teams? Because as you said, as things move closer and closer to the end user, some of the responsibilities blur, don't they?
Absolutely. And, for us, as vendors, it's really exciting. And I think for the enterprises, it's also very exciting. They're moving from that fragmented model where your expertise is just disjointed and spread across an enterprise. So you have your Mongo experts here and your Redis experts over there. And the support models are also as fragmented. They're centralizing and they're capitalizing on that centralization. They're building centers of excellence. They're allowing to kind of multiply their expertise on a single thing instead of watering it down and spreading it over 10 things. And so that shift to kind of consolidation inside big enterprises is allowing them to capitalize on the talent that they already have.
Yeah, and I always get the sense that the talent that they hire going forward is going to have to be different, because the skill set that they're going to need, even if it's not 100% technical, is just going to have to be more aligned with how artificial intelligence is interacting with all of the systems, right? Because some of the systems are sales systems, some of them are finance systems, but as everything moves closer and closer, as you said, to the end user, people are going to have a more holistic view about how this stuff works. And I always feel like that impacts the type of talent that gets hired. I wonder if you're seeing any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The bigger the enterprise, the more data silos they have, right? Yeah. And the more organizations that they've built up around those silos. Right. I think you're right. The modern enterprise technology leader and even developer has a much more holistic, inclusive, collaborative view of that entire process.
Right. So you just made me, I said, well, I was going to let you go after this, but one more. Do you see companies instituting this thing like, okay, this guy or this gal is now the head of AI inside the company? And do you feel like that's kind of like a short-term thing? Because at some point, everybody's going to understand how this works. Do you know what I mean?
We do see that everywhere. And for us, we think it's really helpful, right? That is a key. We find that as a key consolidation point. That head of AI and the group underneath them their first task is to understand the challenges before they fix them.
Right.
And so we interact. That's a key persona for us right now in the strategic consolidation we're seeing in our enterprise customers.
Okay. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. This was perfect.
Michael, it was a pleasure. Yeah, call me anytime.
Okay, we're back. David, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Look, we wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about how enterprises are handling AI agent orchestration and API management as AI infrastructure becomes just more complex. Before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about Boomi so we can have some context.
Yeah, no problem at all. And thanks for having me on the show. So Boomi, for those of you who don't know us, we're an integration and automation platform. But more importantly, we activate data for organizations out there in the market. So what I mean by data activation is most organizations don't have a data problem. They have a data usability problem. So they've got data everywhere in SaaS applications, cloud platforms, legacy systems, partner ecosystems, but they can't easily find it, trust on it, or act on it in real time. And data activation is all about solving that. It's about making data discoverable, governed, and usable, not just for your dashboards and reports, but also for AI systems and business workflows.
So how does that work? In other words, when you go into a big enterprise, and frankly, even into an SME, and you say to them, look, we want to do data activation, what actually has to happen? Just so I can get a better sense.
Yeah, it depends on the maturity of the customer and what their use case is, or who we're talking to. There's a wide variety of different things they might be looking at. They may have use cases that they're looking to automate by integrating different applications together. They may be talking to us at Boomi around how do they solve some of their data management problems. So how do they ingest large volumes of data into data lakes and other systems, potentially for AI to sift through and analyze and process. They might be looking at APIs and, part of their business is around monetizing some of the data they have within their organization and exposing that via APIs. Or they might be looking at how do I set a foundation across all three of those pillars to get my business ready for AI?
Right. Can I just give you a little anecdote and then ask you another question, if you don't mind? Yeah. I remember there was a comedian, you can see how long ago this was when this was said, but she said, I will buy a CD player if you promise me it's the last thing you're ever going to invent for music. I'll buy one. I don't care if the music's good. It's fine. I'll replace all my records with CDs. I'll go do it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I kind of feel like, I don't even know if you'd call this anymore. I haven't had a corporate job in like 15 years, but the IT teams must feel that way, where they're just like, oh no, now, because I feel like one of the reasons why the data was so fragmented and why it's so hard to deal with is because every time like a new department spun up, they'd have a new database instance, and they didn't consider the fact that they were going to have that unstructured data was going to be so useful in the era of AI. And they woke up one day and they were like, oh no, now what do we do? So I'm curious, like when you go into these big enterprises and you have a solution for it, are they like, oh no, now we have to implement something else? Or is it more just like, this is really going to save our lives? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I love that analogy. You know, I've still got my cassette tapes and my LPs as well. So, and even cartridges from my old gaming days. So I'm not throwing any of that stuff away. But no, it's a great analogy because when we go into our customers, they've already invested tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars in some of these capabilities and technologies. They've automated parts of their businesses. They've improved the data quality in certain sections. They may have less fragmentation, et cetera, et cetera. And they're looking at this new world of AI and exactly to your point, trying to work out, do I have to reinvent the wheel? Do I have to rebuild all of that? And it was really interesting. We recently had our sales kickoff in the US, and I was sitting down for lunch with some of my old colleagues, and many of us have a very extensive career in API management.
Yeah.
And we were talking about what's old is new. So there's a lot of concepts that, especially around AI governance, that we would have done with APIs and API management that we have to do with AI now. You know, when MCP is coming to the fore, Model Context Protocol is a way for agents to automatically discover systems in your organization. That needs to be governed. And that shouldn't be an afterthought like we did with APIs. So, and when you look at that as well, MCP can be a wrapper over some of those existing capabilities and technologies. So more often than not, if you're thinking about how organizations are rethinking integration architecture, they're looking at it from a perspective of how do I take what was built for applications and human triggered workflows, and how do I operate differently for AI agents that need high frequency event driven interactions.
Right. So this brings up a couple of really good points. And before we get to that, I wanted to show you this. That's the original iPod.
Wow, you've still got yours. I've got my original. What was the mini one?
The iPod Mini, the Nano.
Yes. I've still got one of those floating around. I don't know if it's appreciated in value yet.
I don't know either, but I still have this anyway. It just reminded me when you said cassette tapes. So here's the thing: if we're going to implement, it's like a two-part question, I think, maybe even three. But if you're going to implement agentic AI, particularly on old workflows, do we suggest then that those old workflows actually need to change, right, to be more efficient for using agentic AI? But then do we also believe that some of the legacy infrastructure that's there, and I don't just mean the software, I mean even some of the hardware, to make sure that the compute can actually handle the level of transactions that's going to take place? Do you see this happening as well, right? Just from a very simple standpoint saying, I want to put an agent on top of this process, but this process wasn't built for agentic AI. It was built for human intervention. So do you see processes changing as well? And then you see the machines that they're running on also being upgraded, I guess is the right word?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part of the question, and that because especially for us at Boomi, that's a question we toy with nearly every day when we engage with our customers and our partners.
Yeah.
You may look at it for one perspective, may be that you may be looking, to your point, agentify and enhance an existing capability.
Yep.
So a really easy use case I normally talk about is a retail one. Think of order to cash. You know, someone's interacting with your retail website. They placed an order potentially for a new TV. That pops into your CRM and that kicks off the workflow. And traditionally, you might take that data out of the CRM, raise an invoice in the ERP, call the warehouse management system to ship take the goods out of stock, and maybe call DHL's API to ship them. So some of our customers are looking at that workflow and saying, well, we've had some issues with a shipper recently. They're being maybe too slow and cost of increase. So could we replace that building block with an AI agent that can actually go off in real time, contact multiple shippers and come back to the workflow with the best shipper at the best price at that point in time? So that's one way of looking at it.
Yep.
The other way is exactly what you've talked about, is how do we reuse or redesign some of these workflows, and some of the capabilities or the autonomy is going into the agents and out of the workflow. So then you start thinking about, well, what's reusable? Is it worth me wrapping an API with an MCP layer? Do I reuse the data models I already have, the integration I already have? So essentially, what tools am I going to make available to that agent for it to work? And that may be a mix of what you've already built, a cut down version of it, or something completely new. The compute underneath is a really, really interesting topic, because I don't have so much conversations around the hardware, the memory limits, the amount of GPUs required, etc. But there's a lot of conversations more recently around token use, and how do we scale back on that? Because if you think about it, your favorite frontier model provider, you might be paying $100-200 a month for access, but then suddenly at the end of the month, you're getting bills of hundreds or thousands of dollars for that input and output token cost.
Look, I like telling this story because we use agentic AI in our business as well. And we had an experience, I think it was last week or the week before now, I can't remember anymore, where I think it was on Anthropic. There's nothing wrong with Anthropic, right? But where we realized that the agent was actually we were trying to run a process overnight, and we realized that the agent was just kept trying to do the same thing over and over again, because when it didn't feel like it had completed its task, it just tried to get something done, anything done. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're having a dumb intern where they're just like, I don't care. I'll watch the windows. If I just can't accomplish something, I have to get something done. So, and that costs tokens. Right now, we pay for unlimited or what? I can't remember what the problem was, but it did something like 200 million token uses, and it was expensive. Yeah, it wasn't cool, right? So I do understand this problem, but further to that, right? When big companies do start employing agents into real workflows, and you brought this up, right? Orchestration. I want to talk a little bit about that. What changes the most about the way they think about orchestration? Because this is kind of the point you were making, right? Where while they're doing this one thing, they have an agent that goes out and says, I'm going to contact all of these delivery services, right? The 3PLs, and just try to figure out which one is best, and then do the same thing for payments and all this other stuff. So talk to me a little bit about orchestration. What has to change for control? And then also the accountability. Like, I spun up the agent, but the agent did the thing. So who's actually accountable for it? I know there's a lot there, but let's try to hit that one by one.
It's a great question to unpack. I think from the orchestration perspective, it's something I like around the MCP discussion. MCP almost becomes a context layer for your organization, exposing the tools and capabilities that you want in a secure way to those AI agents. So they interact through MCP just like the old point-to-point workflows would interact through an API back in the old days. So I think that's one part of the conversation. And then sort of a layer above that is exactly to your point, the orchestration of the agents. You know, it's not just about connecting workflows together today. It's more around, as businesses evolve and mature with AI agents, they're going to have multiple agents. So if you think of customer support as an example, there's multiple steps in the support process, and customers aren't looking at that as a single support agent. They're looking at breaking that down into specialist agents. So how do you orchestrate communication between those? And we've seen it ourselves. You're using ChatGPT, you're using Claude Cowork, you type a question in, it's got to go off and think, and the hourglass is spinning around, or it used to back in the old days. And you've got to wait for an answer. So you've got to start thinking about, well, what do I have to do to the workflow to allow for those sorts of things? And then, sort of to the last point at the top is the governance discussion. And it's no longer, and it's governance not just about, if you go back 3 years, I think a lot of businesses were worried about, well, what is the output from that chat? How do I govern that? Is it correct? But because of that multi-agent architecture these days, it's what's the governance end to end through that entire workflow? How do I know not only what the input was and the output, but what systems did it touch along the way? Exactly to your point, if there was a human in the loop, who intervened? What's the lineage of all of that?
So do you feel like, because this is like this new idea that I've had, not new today, but I've been thinking about this for a while, this idea of, at some point, the digital world is going to have to mirror the analog world. right? So we talk a lot about agentic AI governance, but the reality is we actually have human governance as well. Like you have employees that work for you,
Yep.
and they can't just like freelance any way they want. Like, and they can't just go rogue and come back and go like, I don't know, I just thought it was the right thing to do. And this kind of fits into the autonomy discussion with me as well, because most of your employees are probably like 80% autonomous, maybe, in the sense that if they work for you, they'll come to you and say, David, I've done this thing, but I have a roadblock here. In which direction should we go? And this is the same thing for AI, for agentic AI governance. It's like at some point it has to know what the right thing is to do within a certain amount of guardrails. But does it make sense to you that we're going to build this in a way, particularly in a multi-agent environment? And again, I was talking about Isara, right? This agentic swarm yesterday, the day before. It's like if you have 2,000 agents working on stuff, at some point they have to have guardrails, yeah?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a few things there in that. I love how you said intern before, because one of my colleagues made a very interesting analogy in that these agents, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, they will be digital workers. They'll probably have a Workday ID, as an example,
Yep.
in the HR system.
Yep.
And interestingly, recently at some of the events I've been doing and talking to chief data officers and the like, we've been talking about that, how they're potentially turning into chief HR officers, because they're going to have to onboard and fire and retire these AI agents, exactly to your point. And that stems a really interesting conversation around where governance fits, because yes, you have regulatory pressure, you have geopolitical pressure as well around sovereignty.
Yeah.
But for an organization itself, it's more, some of the more simpler conversations are, how much can I enforce within policy in my organization? And, humans are a big factor in that. And how much can I actually codify within the agent, but still have human in the loop?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because things are getting really, really complex. Like when you get hired as a new grad, you sort of bit by bit over time understand the culture of the company in which you're working, and you understand the rules because you're like, I think I'm just going to go do this. And like Lisa, who sits next to you, goes, we don't do that here, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? But you make a really good point about like being in the HR system, and I want to ask you a question about that as well. I did an entire segment on NHI, so non-human identities, and then HI, so human identities as well. So this is a really interesting thing. But what happens when you spin up an agent, it does some kind of task, let's say it does it pretty well, but not exactly as you wanted it, but you think it's done, so then you spin down the agent, it doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? Like, where's the accountability there? And it's not for you to answer, but I just think about this all the time. It's like, that guy's gone.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He doesn't work for the company anymore. He's gone. And I wonder if there is an HR thing like this where they actually have an employee number, and at some level, somebody's responsible for that. Yeah? Does that make sense?
I would say so. There's got to be accountability somewhere within the organization for those decisions. But even from another way of looking at governance, it's something we do at Boomi. We offer what we call an agent control tower. And so exactly to your point, you were able to get a view of all of the agents running in your organization,
Yeah.
and should they misbehave in some way. So maybe they're hallucinating, maybe there's a sudden increase in token count or something else. You need that single pane of glass to be able to identify that, dig into it, understand where the problem is with that agent. And to your point, if it's misbehaving beyond repair, quickly shut it down.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing too, though, right? As these agents start operating across kind of multiple systems, you mentioned APIs before, and going into different like kind of data environments. It was so funny. The last guy I was talking to, he didn't say data lake. He said people are starting to call them lake houses. I'm like, is there a mountain house as well? Is there a beach house? I just thought it was funny. But like, what new types of operational complexities are coming out of all of this stuff that you think maybe some of these enterprise customers that you're dealing with just completely underestimate, where they're like, oh, we hadn't considered that kind of thing?
Well, it's interesting because when you talk to the analyst community, as an example, you get numbers ranging anything from only 5% to, I think the best I've seen is 23% have been successful deploying AI at scale.
Right.
And I think for me, scale is that key word. because when you don't have that data activation foundation in your organization, you instead tend to focus on manually curated data sets and very specific rules and guardrails for your agents to work. And that works great in a proof of concept. You know, the management's very happy, the board's very happy, etc. But when you go to scale that out, suddenly you're expanding its scope of control, what systems it can access. IT's going, hey, we haven't secured these. We don't know how the agents are going to interact with the data. Before, we had a very deterministic way that you call an API with a very structured format. We knew exactly what the change would be or the data returned. Now with AI, it's completely non-deterministic. It wants to access and change these systems in real time.
Yeah, so how does that impact the way enterprises should think about API management at scale, right? Because you're right. In the old days, it would either just be a developer or somebody else interacting with those APIs. But now you could have not autonomous, but like semi-autonomous agents working with the APIs as well. So how do we have to rethink about API management? I love when you said this earlier. It's like whatever's new is old and whatever's old is new. Like I feel like we're having the same discussion. But it's true, right? Because again, when you bring a new developer and you're like, don't do this to that API kind of thing, right? But you can tell that guy or that girl this thing. But how do you handle does API management have to change now that they're going to have semi-autonomous agents dealing with them?
One of the things I've seen is there's definitely been a bigger focus on enterprises to clean up their API landscape. So trying to understand what unmanaged and zombie APIs they have in their organization. Because if you imagine, exactly to your point, you've had a developer leave 2 years ago or 5 years ago, and there's an API there completely unsecured that is inadvertently exposed as a tool to an agent. So there's a lot of work going on in cleaning up a lot of those capabilities. Again, I think having that well-defined, well-governed API layer, or maybe it is abstracted up into the MCP layer, is valuable as well. But equally, it comes down to how you design your agents and what tools do you allow them to have access to. And that's going to be key as well, having the business understand that out of these 10 APIs, AI agents can only access 2 or 3 of them.
So somebody was actually giving me this really funny example about what some of the agents did, because you mentioned something actually really important is what access do you give the agents, right? What do you actually want them to know? And it's the same thing, you know, again, when I was sitting on the portfolio trading desk, I didn't know what the bond desk was doing. I didn't have access to any of their systems, so I couldn't see like what they were doing. I could go over and ask the guys and the gals what they were doing, but I didn't have access to any of their data. And somebody told me this story like a week or so ago about a sales agent, okay, an agentic AI sales agent who wanted to know what the cost was for every customer inside, but they didn't have access to that database. So what the agent did was it went and asked another agent who was operating inside that business just to give the order of the contracts that everybody had. So now they could suss out not the exact number, but they knew that like customer A was paying more than customer B, which was paying more than customer C. Yeah,
that's crazy. And again, I think back to one of your earlier points. It's a very complex conversation for enterprises to understand this new landscape and understand how do they manage situations like that, because they may be edge cases today, but they may become very common tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. And look, you mentioned earlier that only like 23% of these things succeed. But what do you think it's going to look like? And maybe I'll let you go after this, but like, what do you think it's going to look like when it's not 23, when it's like 63% or 73% of these things start to succeed? Like, what is it going to look like inside these companies? And where is like all the power going to live? Is it like in the orchestration layer? Do you know what I mean? Like, where is this stuff going to live?
I think governance is going to be at all layers. If it's at the integration layer, or the data layer, API, etc. It's good. As I said, the control tower style of concept is going to be key for many organizations to understand what agents they have in their business, how they're being used, who's using them, what tools they have access to, etc.
Yep.
But equally, one of the other shifts we're seeing is how businesses are looking to adopt AI in the future as well. So more recently, I've talked to a few of our customers that have been thinking about, well, the new world is no longer through a human interface. So you won't be going into a product, into a vendor's UI, typing things into boxes and selecting drop-downs. Instead, you'll be having that natural language conversation with an agent to do that for you in the background. So then how do you democratize AI across your organization as well? Because suddenly, to your point, you know, Jenny in HR is going to talk to an AI agent to say, hey, give me all the reports around payroll data, or what CVs do we have on file because we have a new job coming up, etc. So that is a whole other spectrum for the IT organization to think about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I've contended for the past 2 or 3 months that AI is going to be the new UI, right? There aren't going to be any more drop downs. This is a big problem. And at some level, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just completely agreeing.
Yeah. I mean, and at some level, the news, so if an employee today joins a company, they're going to get a Slack ID and they're going to go to Slack to actually do stuff and get stuff done. But my guess is 6 months from now, and I'm just picking a random number, when another new employee gets hired, they're not going to know what the communication tool is, and they're not going to care, because they're just going to tell an agent, tell David that I have this document and blah, blah. It's just going to get sent to you. It may get sent on Slack. It may arrive on Slack. But the UI that's going to get used is the AI or the agentic AI that's actually going to do that task for you. You're not going to have to type it in. It's just going to have access to your file system and do that kind of stuff. And that's why I think, I mean, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but that's why I think some of these companies can have a problem, because it doesn't really matter what the back end is at some point. It just matters what the front end is, and the front end is your AI orchestration layer, yeah?
Yep, exactly. So it comes down to that data activation layer once again.
Exactly.
Having that set in your business as that foundational layer is going to allow you to have more control when you bring those agents into your organization.
Okay. This is just a fascinating conversation. We're going to have you back, or somebody else from Boomi back. This was really great. I really appreciate your time, David. Thank you so much for doing this today.
No, thanks for having me on the show. It was a great conversation.
Okay, Clemen, thank you so much for joining us today. We wanted to have you on the show because we wanted to talk about how market intelligence platforms are using artificial intelligence to process massive data streams and translate that into actionable insights for investors. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about spiking.
Hey, thanks, Michael, for having me. First, before I share about spiking, is my background as a trader and investor of the market. I started investing in the year 2000.
Wow, okay.
And back in those days, it was traditional Excel spreadsheet, paper and pen.
I remember.
And then the breakthrough really came around 2014, 15, when Microsoft launched cloud computing together with Amazon Web Services and so on. So that was the year. In 2016, exactly yesterday, 1st of April, we launched our product. That was the birth of spiking.
Okay.
And we are solving a real pain in the capital market. And it started off with a very simple question. How did the traditional titans like Warren Buffett, Bill Ackman, Carl Icahn, Ray Dalio, how did they consistently beat the market all the time? Yet the small guys, I call them the David versus Goliath, are consistently being screwed. And I found the answer is really all about information asymmetry.
For sure.
Somehow, the bigger boys have access to better quality information, while the smaller guys are always following the news and the rumors and so on. That's how they got slaughtered in the market. And with that pain, I wanted to solve this pain, and that's how we launched spiking on 1st of April, 2016.
Interesting that you actually were able to buy the URL spiking.com. Hopefully you didn't have to way overpay for it, but I guess maybe back in 2000 and whenever you bought it, it was okay. But I was just shocked by that. Anyway, so I think there's actually a little bit more to this, and tell me where you think I'm wrong, right? So I do think that there's an information asymmetry for sure. And I would tell day traders this all the time. You're trading against guys and gals that have way more information than you. And in the day and age of high frequency trading, which we can argue about whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, they also have a faster way to trade than you. So they're getting information way faster than you are. So they're getting static information faster than you, but the dynamic information that they're getting is way faster than you're getting, right? And if you can even the playing field, it still doesn't mean you're going to win. It just means you have a better chance. At least your information is the same, but you still have to have a decision-making ability. And frankly, if you go back and you read Ray Dalio's book, I'm sure you have, you'll see that even at the beginning, he was getting carried out, right, all the time, because even though he had all the information, he was still making bad trading decisions, right? So it's not just an information asymmetry thing. But here, let's fast forward to today. How are institutional investors actually using artificial intelligence for market intelligence today? And where is it genuinely improving decision-making versus just simply accelerating information overload? Do you know what I mean? Because you can have too much information at some level. Yeah. How is it helping them actually make better decisions?
Great question. And I want to highlight, since you brought up Ray Dalio,
Go for it.
I would consider myself the first batch of students trained by him in Asia. You know, Ray Dalio has this partnership with the Wealth Management Institute, which is a school backed by the government in Singapore. And I graduated in the first cohort. And the interesting thing, Michael, is that when you attend Ray Dalio's class, he doesn't mention a single stock name.
Yeah. Why would he though?
I mean, he would just talk about equities, commodities, interest rate, gold. That's it. You don't see a single name, single technology, no mention of AI and so on, right? That is Ray Dalio, my teacher.
But tell me why. And tell the audience why he doesn't mention the names and why you think that matters.
I think he's so careful in this partnership with Wealth Management Institute. He doesn't give any form of analysis or prediction. It's all about big macro picture, covering multi-countries. And for the work that he's doing, most people will not have the resources and the know-how to kind of deploy the Holy Grail portfolio that he's preaching about.
Yeah, there's no way, right? Because people don't have enough resources to be able to make the same, even just the same asset allocation that he's doing.
Exactly, because you do not have the arsenal of resources that he has.
No.
So what I did, graduating from his cohort, I took back everything I learned about Holy Grail portfolio and I operationalized it. I put the entire system into my software. So right now, we have the Holy Grail portfolio on any money manager on Wall Street, Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett, Bill Ackman, Temasek, any name that you have, put it into my system and I can tell you whether they're going to make money or not. And one of the most interesting things I discovered, Michael, is this. When I put Warren Buffett's portfolio and squeeze it through into the Ray Dalio Holy Grail, I seen the secret. And the secret is this. Almost more than 80% of his wealth is found inside the Ray Dalio Holy Grail portfolio. And his portfolio will consistently beat the market because he's appearing in the 4 quadrants of the economy. Whether you are booming, recessionary, Goldilocks, or stagflation, that guy got stocks distributed in the 4 quadrants. And that's why Warren Buffett consistently beat the market.
So what are those 4 quadrants?
You have booming market, recessionary market, stagflation market, and Goldilocks. So on a X and Y axis, Warren Buffett's stocks is almost equally distributed in the 4 quadrants. So regardless, the market goes up, goes down, goes sideways, that guy is consistently beating the market.
But is there, so you can just follow like the Berkshire Hathaway way of investing, right? You can just look at their portfolio and buy little bits and pieces of it. And frankly, if you could fractionalize it, that would make it a lot easier. Or you could just buy Berkshire Hathaway and go home, right? Because now you have access to his, and even though the stock price is high, it doesn't really matter because you're still getting access to his portfolio. It's almost like buying a mutual fund in a way. Sorry, I interrupted you. It looked like you were going to say something. Go ahead.
And that's what most people believe, that they could follow Warren Buffett just like that. And fundamentally, that is incorrect. Let me explain to you why, Michael.
Tell me.
He owns Coca-Cola like 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Forever. We can never, ever beat his average price. And I got so frustrated and feeling angst about this. I think, how the hell we have ever have a chance to beat Warren Buffett at his average price owning Coca-Cola? Because he started like 50 years ago. So there's no way we can have a core advantage against traditional institutional players like him. So what I developed through our system is this. Yes, I can't beat him on the average price for Apple, for Coca-Cola, the traditional stocks that he has been holding, but I can beat him potentially for new stocks that he has invested. Take, for example, he just announced last quarter, he took a stake in Alphabet. I said, wow, great. Finally, we have a chance to buy below the extreme value investing, I call it. I mean, he started from Benjamin Graham, passed down to Warren Buffett. He doesn't really have a book of his own. So we kind of preach about, okay, he's a believer of value investing. But if I can buy below his price, I'm the extreme value investor.
Right.
And that's what we are going for.
But then, but what role does artificial intelligence play in all of this?
Oh, it's really important.
Tell me.
Now, we have to take one step back before artificial intelligence got birthed into the world.
Go for it.
Step one. It's really happening. It literally happened in my tenure in Spiking when we launched 1st April 2016. During that time, it was the birth of cloud computing. And what does that mean? It enables us to solve big data analytics. Big data is a big pain for us until they put it on the cloud and say, wow, holy moly, finally we can process so much data at a single point in time. And then in 2016, 17, back then, IBM has relaunched AI called the Watson. But it was so complicated. And I said, how do you use this damn thing?
Yeah.
There's no way we can understand what exactly is artificial intelligence. And you fast forward that 2016 to 2023, holy moly, ChatGPT launched. And launched in January, within 2 months, acquired 100 million users.
Yep.
And we look at it and say, wow, finally someone can explain what is AI. You put in a prompt, the answer goes out. No videos, no pictures, no voice, pure texture in, pure texture out. We got it.
But back in the day, did IBM actually give people access to Watson? Could you actually pay for access to Watson?
Oh, no, they have a lab. They will invite all the tech startups and say, come, test our products. And there's a whole array of products. You have IBM, you have Amazon Web Services. Everyone is offering their products because it's like, we are like their mini-mice.
Yeah.
Lab test. We are their mini-mice. And they needed us to give them the input. But it was not massive. So when ChatGPT, OpenAI launched ChatGPT, everybody went in to give the input. So they got quality input data with a quality output and data as well. That's why they took off so fast. But for the early days of IBM, AWS, no. It is too hardcore. Nobody could really understand how to deploy AI.
Yeah, for sure. And because, but it was first of all, the compute wasn't there for sure. Even back in 2016, people weren't using GPUs to do this. And frankly, it was 10 years ago. The throughput probably wasn't even there either, right? Like I have gigabit Ethernet at home. So I have plenty of speed now and I have plenty of compute. But what changes when somebody uses spiking, and where do you employ, and do you have access to all of the models? Like where does it fit into the workflow where the model is now going out? Is it going out and analyzing all the data? Is it writing research reports? Like what is it doing and what is it giving to the people that use spiking, and then how do they make decisions based on that?
Excellent. That's a great question. Let's start off with 3 phases of our launch. Phase 1, when we launched in 2016, we merely want to answer one question, and that is, how can we trade alongside the giants of the market? We call it standing on the shoulders of giants, and we can look further, right?
Yep.
Now, in order to solve this problem, we didn't know if we had to embark on a 10-year journey. I mean, literally, we are 10 years today, right?
Yeah.
In order to track them, we got to go and make sure we get all the transactional data of every single money manager on Wall Street. We're talking about pension funds, retirement funds, universe of funds, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. We're talking about heroes of the funds like Warren Buffett, Bill Ackman, Ray Dalio, Renaissance Technologies. Every single one we have to track. That's our step 1. And that took us like 3 years just to crack the code.
But did you have to buy that data?
No, we don't buy the data.
Because that would have been
just proprietary approach.
So how did you get all that data?
That is our proprietary approach. That's a way to look at it, and obviously, in the capital markets, there's mandatory filings that they have to declare their ownership.
Yeah, fair enough.
We start from there.
Yep. If they're running a fund, they do have to say what's sitting inside that fund. Okay. And then what changed when? So that was the first stage. You said there were 3 stages.
All right, that's phase 1. So we are able to first get all the transactional data. Then we enter into phase 2. Can we ask this question? At any point in time, do we know where are all the hot money flowing to which particular stock? Oh, that became a very, very challenging engineering question. And we have to solve it. And back then, we didn't have artificial intelligence.
Yep.
So what we do, we develop our own methodology. And the methodology, we call it the FIAT method, F-I-A-T. Now, what exactly is the FIAT? Step 1 is fundamental analysis. And the way we look at fundamental analysis is really way different from what majority of the market people are doing. We created a very, very important metric called a universe net stock purchase. Take, for example, every day there are someone buying and selling Tesla. Some will buy, some will sell, right? But what we did with this metric is, if I take a snapshot right now, I enter in the software, I say, tell me now, what is the net? And my system will generate, okay, universe net purchase $10 billion. There are net positive purchase of buyers of Tesla stock.
Yep.
That is the most important metric. Then from fundamental analysis, we dive down. I say, I want to know the top 100 money managers, because the sheer mention of their name, the stock price will pop. So we develop and curate our own proprietary top 100 money managers. Are they also buying Tesla? Or are they also selling Tesla? And they also have a net purchase indicator. So we combine the whole universe of Wall Street, and in addition to that, the universe of the top 100 money managers.
Got it.
If both are aligned, we have a jackpot. But oftentimes we found out that, Michael, guess between the universe versus top 100, who is leading the pack? Is it the majority or the top 100?
It's got to be the top 100, yeah.
Yes, spot on.
Yeah.
That is the secret. So fundamental analysis, we solve that. Step 2, we solve on insider trading.
Yeah, I was going to say insiders, yeah.
And insider trading is, we really want to open up the black box. I mean, everybody is looking at data. I started in the days of level 2. I mean, I'm sure you understand what's level 2. We just look at level 2, who's really buying something, but you do not know who's the guy behind it.
Yeah.
You can see the volume popping up and down. So now what we've done is we strip naked the black box. I can show you exactly who are the fund managers, who are the lead investors, putting down the most money into this single stock, and who doubled down between previous quarter versus current quarter.
Because
did they double down 100%, 2,000%, 10,000%? We even see money managers like, hey, 3 months apart, how could the earnings change so much? You double down 10,000%. What is your bloody thesis, right? Yeah. I mean, these are real core fundamental questions. They probably know something that we do not know about.
For sure. That's why they're insiders, yeah.
Insider trading analysis.
Okay. What does the A stand for?
A is for alerts.
For what?
One of the things, alerts, ALERTS, alerts.
Oh, got it.
So one of the things I'm trying to crack the code is it because of the news announcement causing the stock price to move, or the transaction data? Which one is really leading the pack? For example, case in point, Bill Ammon announced that he bought into Alphabet and he doubled down. So is it because of Bill Ammon buying Alphabet and the rest jumped on the bandwagon and the stock price went up? Or is there other news about perhaps Google launched Gemini and Gemini is making a big impact on artificial intelligence and people buying on the news? Who is really leading who, right? So under alerts, what we did, we plot a vertical timeline. Really track by the day, track by the hour and the minute to the second. Which one is happening first? Is it transaction followed by the news, or news followed by the transaction? And in this vertical timeline, it gives us the visual impact. Okay, today the stock price has spiked 20%. I follow the timeline, I kind of able to guess it is the transaction or the news moving the price.
Yep.
That alerts for you. And finally, T is for technical analysis. You know, when I first started, Michael, I actually had a vision. I say, why don't I come out my very own Chiang indicator? And most of the indicators, you know, are named after the inventor, like Williams indicator and so on, right? I say, but I'll be like one out of the 200 indicators out there. What's the point of doing that?
Yeah.
So in doing so, I decided to map everything I know about transactional data into the stock chart, and I call it the red box. And the red box will give us the visual impact. Take, for example, Q4. Is there a net positive purchase? Yes, $10 billion. Who's buying the stock? We know all this information. Now, if I put a red box overlay on top of the chart, I will know exactly what price did they buy. And all I really need to do is buy below the red box. I'm the champion, the mother of all champions of all the value investor. And there you go, FIAT.
I got it. Can I ask you this, though? As more like companies adopt artificial intelligence, does that market intelligence actually become more democratized? In other words, are you accomplishing what you set out to accomplish by allowing this sort of David versus Goliath to actually be able to play in the same field. Do you know what I mean? Is that actually working?
It is working simply because of this. Finally, we have a chance to buy below the average price of the professional fund managers on Wall Street.
But why do you have the ability to buy below the average price?
So here we go. Case in point, Warren Buffett owned Coca-Cola for the last 50 years.
Yep.
You can never buy cheaper than him.
No way. Disney probably the same thing.
And forever the guy is just averaging up. He will never lose because he's averaging up. He's not averaging down.
No.
And that's why he's always net positive. He's just collecting dividends. Come, give me more money. Give me more money. That's how they make money, professional fund managers.
For sure.
Now, for someone new today, a virgin, a novice about to enter the market, that guy will say, oh my God, how do I start? I can never beat Warren Buffett. Maybe I should give up. And that's what I found among retail investors. They just simply give up. They say, this is too much for me. Forever, I cannot beat the guy up there. What for I take part in this competition? So I say, no. You start off today clean, fantastic, because you will be able to see through AI, artificial intelligence, which of the stocks today you going to own and you buy below the fund manager. The fund manager is in pain, you are in the green.
Got it. Yeah, because so the artificial intelligence you're saying is the place where it informs you whether the price you're buying is above or below or at the average price of a bigger investor. Yeah.
Yes, and not just one, the whole collection of them.
The whole collection of them. Yeah, interesting. Okay, where do you think this is going? Like, what happens next? And then I'll let you go. Yes,
this question was just posed like in the last 40 hours. I think CNBC asked Catherine from Up Invest, how do you see your fund competing with artificial intelligence? And she said this. She said, I think there will be many mini funds launched using AI.
For sure.
And does it mean traditional fund managers will become obsolete overnight? She said, no. You still need to formulate the investment thesis, the bigger plan. Without the investment thesis, you go in with AI, you are just becoming a day trader. In, out, and you have no wisdom throughout the process.
Right.
And I found what she said kind of resonate with what I've been doing in the last 20 years, 25 years to be exact. Why am I able to sustain and run this marathon since the year 2000 until today, 25 years? And I'm still very passionate about it because I went into the market with this intent. I'm here to seek wisdom. I'm here to learn from the best of the best and put myself into the battlefield and see, do I have a chance to beat them to the same game? And guess what? Last year, our own fund, we delivered 44.47%. And I did a ranking among top 100. We probably rank about number 7. For a mini fund like ours, we have a chance to beat the big boys out there.
Yeah.
But they are bigger than us simply because they have a much larger AUM.
Yeah, I was going to say. So
everybody started small somehow.
Right, so you saw me typing, and the thing that I was looking up was how much money does Renaissance manage, just because it was the only name that popped into my head. $106 billion.
Yes.
Right, but that can't compete with State Street, who has $1 trillion, or Capital, which has a couple of $1 trillion. When those guys move money, it moves the market. So you have to pay attention to that too. Okay, look, this was really interesting. I really appreciate it, Clemen. I'm going to let you go now. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And yeah, good luck. Hopefully your fund gets bigger as well.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Thank you. Complete pleasure. Okay, that's it for ATP Insights. Thank you again for joining us. Give us a thumbs up on today's video. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube and follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Let us know in the comments if there's anything you would like us to discuss on our upcoming shows. My name is Michael Waitz. Bye for now.